Hey guys, this has been a project I've been wanting to make for a long time. I bought this new old stock Raptor 3 Briggs and Stratton block. It's got the cast iron sleeve in it. The only thing I've done to it is shave the eyebrows down a little bit and knock down the rough spots in the exhaust and intake ports here, just to help a little bit, because this is going to be a mild build. This is going to be for my old mini bike. I'll talk about what I've already done off camera. I say off camera, but I made a little clip of just about everything. I lapped the valves, lap done. These are all new valves. I went with the Raptor 3 rod and piston. You see the oil dipper is built into the rod here, so it'll hold up better than a stock rod. If you're going to be turning more than 6,000 RPM, I recommend a billet rod and flywheel. But this is going to be what I call a mild, or probably a hot stock build. Ain't gonna be nothing too crazy. I did get a new crankshaft. This was hard to find here, and it's got the ball bearing that I was always told they had to be pressed on, but this one goes right on just like you think it was supposed to be. And so that's a brand new crankshaft. It's the newer type. They don't have the cam part for the points. The block ain't made for that either. I got a copper head gasket. I've already checked the ring gap off camera and got a nice tight ring gap. The specs I was given for these for racing is the top ring around 2 thousandths, the middle ring 2 to 4 thousandths, and the oil ring 8 to 10 thousandths or tighter. And I got mine set for about 5. There's an error on the piston there. It points towards the flywheel side. Some people say they put it in this way. Apparently it really don't matter. So I just point it towards the flywheel, because a stock piston has a notch in it, and I've always put that on the flywheel side, so that's the way I'm going to do it. And your dipper here, it angles down in one way. It goes in just like this. It angles towards the camshaft side. Did a fire slot here. It's a mild one. I didn't go too crazy with it. I made a video on how to do that, and also talked about indexing spark plugs, which is getting the gap pointing towards the fire slot. I've probably been eyeing this little white box here, dyno cams. I got a good buy on a 00-6 cam. We'll talk more about the cam here in a little bit, but we're going to go ahead and start putting it together. I'm building this with, I'd say probably 80% new or new old stock or aftermarket parts. As you can see, basically everything from here over is new. I'm using an old flywheel, an older carburetor. Also got billet lifters. The only used parts is going to be the flywheel, carburetor, gas tank, oil sump. I think that's about it. Everything else is going to be new or new old stock. This side cover here, oil sump, is really good condition. I put a new seal in it. This is the one for the bearing. I'm doing this as a single bearing build. The ideal engine for high RPMs would be a dual bearing, where it'd have another ball bearing inside the crankcase, but this don't have that. Okay, before I get too involved and forget about it, I want to share with you some part numbers. Give you an idea of what I'm using on this. It's like I said, I started to go with a stock cam and stock piston and rod and everything, and not do any modifications to it. And I said, well, I'm building this new, so I might as well do something to it, because it's already modified and not have a governor on it. It's already made like that, so I figured I might as well take advantage of that and just build a little mild engine up. Another little point I'll talk about: the camshaft. Recommend using new exhaust valve springs for both valves. I got 2 old springs here. You can see this one on the right here is smaller. That's your stock intake valve. So if you put the stock exhaust valve on both of them, you're going to stop some valve float on the intake valve. And this block came with a seal already installed on the flywheel side. I'm using Lucas for assembly oil. I like it because you can just work right out of the bottle here. It's always worked good for me. Anytime you get new parts like this, they got like a packing grease all over them, so you always want to, you know, remove all that. I just used a carburetor cleaner on it to get the most of it off. Now if you're using a billet rod, you'll want to check your crankshaft clearance. Since these are all factory parts, it should not be an issue. No play at all in that. I'm not used to working with all new parts. I think this is the first time I've ever built a new engine like this. Now I've rebuilt, you know, a lot of engines, but I never built an engine from the ground up like this. It's to me, it's something real fun to do, you know. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is get ready to drop the rod and piston in. I may not show it on camera just to speed things up. I do need to remove the rod cap first. All right, so I got the rod and piston ready to go. I did put a mark on the side that goes forward here, just to make sure everything's orientated right. I'm just going to sit down there just like that. Then you want to take the wooden end of a hammer and gently tap it down. There is that. Now we're ready to put the rod bolts in. Also, don't forget to offset your ring gaps. And before I started, I'll probably put just a little bit of oil down in there just to make sure there's plenty of oil on the rings and everything. I'm always afraid of an engine starting dry or something. You definitely do not want that. Alright, so now I'm going to get the rod bolt started here. The only thing I don't like about this type of rod is not having the locking tabs that bend over on it. There's really no way to do it either. I was thinking about maybe putting just a little dab of Loctite on these too to keep them from backing out. I think it will. See, I just put a little smear on there, and I'm going to put a little bit of Lucas on the bearing rod cap here. Some people say I use too much oil when I put stuff together. I'm afraid of something starting dry and ruining everything, especially when all the parts are new on something like this. So you want to make sure you got it orientated right. Like I said, I already marked everything. I'm going to get these bolts ran in, and we'll look at it here in a second, torquing it. Alright, so I had to use a 1/4 inch 8mm deep well with the adapter on my 3/8 torque wrench. That's the only way I can get up through there without hitting the oil dipper on there. So you want to take it just a little bit at a time on both of them. You don't want to really do all the way with one. Just kind of go back and forth on them. It's really not that tight. So there we go. I much prefer the old factory type. It's got the tab you bend over, that way you know them bolts will never work out. And after you get the rod torqued, you want to spin this. It should spin free. If you didn't check your clearance here, or if something's not right, you're going to get in a, if it binds up, then you know something's wrong right there. So if it still spins free, and you know that's going to be, should be alright. It's best to measure everything. You'd use a plastic gauge to measure this. The only reason I didn't measure it today is because I forgot to order it. Okay, so next thing, I'm get ready to put the camshaft in. I'll spin this over until my timing mark is about right over here. And it shouldn't be an issue, but always check to make sure your rod's not going to hit anything, because you know, I'm using slightly different parts. But all this stuff is designed for this block. Now this crankshaft is actually just for a Model 13 IC. It's not specifically for a Raptor, but it's the same thing. And another little information I'll put in here. This is a Raptor 3 block, like I said earlier. It's model number 133230, type 812401. So that's the specs on this. If you need to order parts for a Raptor 3, it's easier to find it that way than looking up Raptor 3. Okay, so now we're ready for that camshaft. And I got to clean it a little bit. It's still got the factory packing grease on it. So let me get that and get the lifters in there, and we'll go from there. Okay, so this is the cam, and I'm going to talk about the specs that come on the cam card. It's grind number 00-6, recommended class stock, junior stock. This goes on with the valve timing and exhaust timing. The valve lash for the intake is 5 thousandths and exhaust is 4 thousandths. Check when it's cold. And the ignition timing is 28 to 29 degrees before top dead center. So I'm got flywheel keys to adjust my timing about 6 or 7 degrees from the factory mark. And it says use new stock Briggs exhaust valve springs. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Let me get this unpacked here. We'll look at it before I clean it off. It just got that real sticky grease all over it. I'd rather clean off before I put assembly oil on it. But you can really see how it's modified. It's got that little bit of a ramp right here on the exhaust. And these are supposed to, you can see it on the intake there too. It just changes the more or less the duration of the valves. It don't really change the offset or the overlap as much. But they should give quite a bit of power on the mid-range. Another good cam for a stock bed like this is a 94 SS. It costs a lot more. I got this one on eBay real cheap. Somebody bought it and didn't need it for the project, so I saved a little bit of money on that. But yeah, let me clean it up a little bit and then we'll throw it in. You can use factory lifters with this type of cam, but it's recommended to use these, they said. So I figured I'd spend the extra $20 and get them just to have a little bit of insurance on it. Now with the real big cams, you have to reinforce the metal here where the lifters go in, because they're bad about breaking out. So I'm going to spin this around so I can get to it. And these installed just like on a regular engine. You just put both of them in there. And since everything's new, it don't matter which one right now. We don't have no valve lash set. I'm going to get the whole the bottom end put together first before we start doing all that. One. If you use a factory lifter, you're taking a chance of breaking one of them or causing more damage to your cam or something. You definitely do not want that. Put a little bit of Lucas down here in the cam bearing. Now it's important to make sure you get at least motor oil. But I highly recommend using Lucas or STP or something like this. I used to use STP all the time, but I like the bottle that these come in, so it's a little easier to work with and not quite as messy. Just want to make sure all the lobes are coated real good. Line up your timing gear. Just like that. I always like to put a little bit of oil on that gear. It's really not necessary, but it's just something I've always done. And put some on the crankshaft here. Just it's not really necessary since we're putting that bearing on. So, okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and just put the bearing on so I won't forget about it. You want to put the motor oil or a little bit of this Lucas in the bearing too, the way the bearing's got something in it. And a lot of these will come with seals on it. If you get I call it aftermarket bearings, and you want to remove the seals, that way the oil can get to it in this case, because they're not going to be grease packed like it would be in a transmission or an axle or something. Okay, now the only thing left to do here is put the gasket on and the sump. I got to remember to put oil plugs in it. Just don't have no oil plugs in it where it's a new block. But my luck start pouring oil in there and it starts pouring back out. And another thing we'll talk about briefly, because I'm sure I'll be asked about, is what type of oil I'm going to be using. I'm just going to be using I've been using Havoline oil here lately, and Havoline and Valvoline. So I'm going to be using the Havoline 30 weight in here just to get it started and broke in. And I'm eventually going to switch over to, after it gets broke in, to a synthetic oil, probably a 4T racing oil or something, just to help. Not so much trying to get more power or anything out from a reduced friction, but I want to try to keep this engine alive for a long time before it has to be rebuilt again. And it's not going to be ran very much anyway, so I want to do everything I can to preserve this engine because it's a new engine. So, alright, so here's the oil sump gasket. You can see Raptor 3 gasket comes like that. I don't know why it's got that sealant on there for it. You'd think it'd be on both sides, but it's not. The part number for this gasket, it's a standard Briggs 5 horsepower part, but if you want the Raptor 3 gasket, it's 555237. If you don't put oil on seals, it'll burn up in a matter of minutes, and you'll be leaking oil everywhere. Been there, done that. As long as there's something on there like that, you'll be good. You want to load up the cam bearing here, like that. Now this is ready to go on. And like I said before, we're not putting the governor gear on here, because this engine is not going to have a governor. And if you're removing the governor, make sure you take the washer off here. There'll be a small spacer down here. You want to make sure that's removed, or it's going to get in the engine and cause problems. So now we're ready to install this, and the whole bottom part will be done. Alright, so I took the bearing off the crankshaft and put it in the sump here, and it seemed like it's going to go. You want to get it, you can just barely feel it start going, and it should slide right on like that. There we go.